Today's episode is brought to you by Bones Coffee Company. You can forget about boring coffee when you drink Bones Coffee. Not only do they offer a variety of flavors such as strawberry cheesecake and maple bacon, they are a family-owned company that puts great detail not only in their coffee, but in the artwork that comes on each individual bag. Bones Coffee is a coffee club that will deliver your favorite coffee to your door every month. If that wasn't enough, they also have some amazing swag to offer. Check out Bones Coffee Company today. I'll have my affiliate links in the show notes for you. Hi guys, welcome to another True Crime Tuesday event. I have my two co-hosts on the line. I have Tammy and Cricket, who have been very patient with me. We've been struggling with computer program problems and my scheduling problems, and thank you for your patience, girls. Thank you for showing up for me.
Always. How are you doing?
Chaos. Tammy, thank you for coming on too. So I've got Cricket. For those of you that haven't watched before, I've got Cricket, who is a fellow victims advocate and crime writer. And then I have Tammy, who is a fellow researcher. And those are my two team members who have to put up with all of my nonsense. And I thank you in advance. So, of course, make sure and check out Bones Coffee. I got the bag sitting back there. I'm working on French vanilla. That's my affiliate that helps me make more videos. So check out Bones Coffee for some coffee. Today we're going to be talking about a few things, but we've actually been going over kind of a series of cases that kind of tie in with each other. We've talked about Durante Martin, and we've talked about Timmy Dees. These are two cases out of a series that I have. I had 15 names. I'm down to 14 because one I don't think really ties in to this. But it's a whole series of cases where they're very disturbing. They're all in the same area. None of them seem to be being solved. Some of the newer ones, they don't seem like they're getting the attention they need. Some of the older cases, you can see that the police force actually did as much as they could. But it seems like almost now the set of law enforcement that we have in this area seem to not be maybe doing as much as they could be doing. So this is kind of what we're talking about. We're going to talk about John Paul Parton. He's a 19-year-old kid who goes by JP. He's been missing in Frederickstown in Madison County, Missouri since May 16th of 2021. And that date may not seem relevant to you, but those of you that have been following and have been studying this series of kind of corruption cases, you'll find out that that is 3 weeks after another case that we just covered. It's right after Durante Martin's his death. Now, that whole case in itself, I actually got flagged on YouTube on that case and got my monetization pulled on that case because it was classed as one thing, which I'm not allowed to say that word that starts with an S, even though it was obviously not that. It was a flat out homicide. And JP happened to be at that party. Durante, just to review, Durante was an African-American football player from another town who was driven into this town, into this rural area for a birthday party. The only person he knew was the person he came with. And unfortunately, this case has there's some racist tendencies and things in this case. There's a lot of corruption in this case. There's a lot of just lack of concern, it seems like, in this case. But Durante Martin ended up dead in the attic of this house, and JP happened to be at that party. Now, the story came out that all of this was done by Durante himself, but JP witnessed this and said it absolutely was homicide. Now, JP says this to his parents. He also says, hey, Mom, I also know that Maddie's death was actually a homicide too, and that she was killed back in July of 2020. So it was the year before, the summer before she was killed. And for some reason, he's in a bad place with some rough crowd that has some of these kids should have a rap sheet as long as my arm, but they seem to just get away with whatever. And then all of a sudden he's decided to unburden himself. He's starting to talk to his parents. He calls his parents and he tells them, you know, Durante's death was not by his own hand. Durante's death was murder, and he says, and so was Maddie's. And then 3 weeks later, he ends up missing, and nobody knows why. And then it just so happens to be just before the inquest. Now, what happened in Durante's case? It was immediately labeled as something he done, and it was just like they wanted to hurry up and swish it away. Well, you end up with a black football player dead in the attic of a white man's house. Who that white man who has been known to make racial slurs, who is known to be a very racist person on Facebook. I mean, he's publicly saying all these things, and you have a black guy end up dead in his house. To me, how in the world would you ever think that you're going to just be able to shove that under the rug? I mean, that's astronomical. We don't think that kind of, to me, in my naive mind, I don't think that kind of stuff still exists in 2024, but it obviously does. And so there was a jury inquest called, and to question the police conclusion and all of these things. And there was enough evidence in this inquest that they said, no, it is not the S word we're not allowed to say on YouTube. And so I thought, that's bad enough. But then you turn around and you've got a 19-year-old kid who tells his parents the inquest is coming up. And so I don't know if he's just in a point where he's unburdening himself or if he's starting to be scared for his safety. But he calls his parents and he's like, look, basically he confesses 3 things. One, he says Durante was murdered. So was Maddie. Okay, so then he also turns around and says, hey, me and some of the guys, we knocked over a business and stole $2,000. The money wasn't split properly, and so was getting mad, and then all of a sudden he's gone. So my thought on it is, how could this possibly just, it's like one of a dozen cases here where it's just like, yeah, he's gone. Oh well. It's almost like, and this has been reported in other online outlets. It's almost as if the sheriff of this county and the police department of this county, if there's anything to do with drugs, it's almost like that's their excuse to step back and not do their job. And so they're like, well, the drug addicts will take care of themselves. Well, unfortunately, in this case, it seems like the drug addicts are killing other people. They're not just killing each other, they're killing other people, and so I've tried to watch a few videos on JP, and I find them disturbing because everyone wants to go off trying to justify why we should care. They're like, well, he was doing bad things, he robbed somebody, but we should still care. One video spent 20 minutes. They laid out the information, and then they spent 20 minutes telling everybody why we should care. We don't need to know why we should care. He's a human being, and he's missing because he was going to testify that Durante's case was not the S word we can't say. So, Cricket, I know you've studied this case a lot. What do you find? I know there's more that happens after he's missing. Jump in and let the people know some of the strange things that happened. For some, like his girlfriend, per se, she had some strange behavior.
Yes, I'll call her KK initials. Right after he went missing, she deleted her Facebook page and she changed his profile picture on his page. Not only that, she did not go out to search at all. She did not help with flyers or anything. And that's all that's been said about her. But I find that highly suspicious. And she was saying that they broke up because he was cheating on her. But none of that came out until after he went missing.
Yeah. Well, and to me, it's unusual that, for one, I don't I'm married. I'm not dating, obviously, but my husband doesn't have my login information for my Facebook page. So I'm like, why is she able to change his Facebook? You want to know why? You know, a real good way to change somebody's Facebook profile when you don't have their login information, logical explanation, they have the phone. See, JP has never been found and neither has his belongings. So how else would his Facebook page be changed unless they've shared login information? Perhaps she has the device. I don't know. This is just all speculation, but it is very strange that it's like she changed the profile picture because the profile picture was him and her. So it was like she's trying to put space between her and him for a reason. And yeah, if he was cheating on her and all this stuff, sure, that would be something that you would do. You want to just, back in the day, back in the 80s before social media, you got a metal trash can and you put all their pictures in it and you burned it. Right, Tammy?
Yeah, exactly.
That's how we broke up in the 80s.
Yeah.
But so I find it odd, the timing of it. And I guess if you're angry enough at somebody because you think they cheated on you, that you wouldn't care what happened to them. But to me, that still seems drastic. To me, it seems like you would still, oh my gosh, this person's missing. I'm going to put a flyer in, I'm going to search. I'm going to, to me, that's a little more vindictive than I think is normal. Tammy, you think that's a normal level of behavior for her?
Well, you might even dedicate a Facebook page to him as opposed to just deleting him off of your page. You probably could put a bunch of pictures up there and say, help me, this is what he looks like, can we find him? And you probably would dedicate yourself to that, not just delete everything, I would think.
To me, that would be more of a possible thing. Now, JP has connections to all these other little things, but in his case, what I find so disturbing is the fact that it's so close to Durante's death, and it's so close. It's like right in between the inquest and the Durante's death, and I feel like that makes it, to me, that's the smoking gun. To me, that's the motive right there. You don't need to look around anywhere else. And to me, the robbery, I want to know if he'd been active in robbing things before, or if that was something that he kind of got mixed up in on accident, and that was something they were going to use to blackmail him with later, to try to keep him shut up. I want to know who else he told, because he's obviously, if he's talking to his parents saying Durante was murdered, Maddie was murdered, here's a robbery. To me, that makes me think he's told somebody else, and that somebody else let it leak. You know what I mean? They were, somebody else was worried about him.
And I think too, as far as he was concerned, he thought he was going on a camping trip.
Yeah, and see, that was another thing that's disturbing. Nobody knows when he was last seen. He didn't have a cell phone, so they can't track him through a cell phone. He didn't even have a checking account, did he? Is this the one that I was reading? I read so many that I try not to get them all mixed up, but I think this is the one that said he didn't have a checking account and he didn't have a cell phone. And so how are they going to track him? They can't track him using his phone. He's not like Riley Strain where they try to track him through his Apple Watch. He doesn't have anything like that. They can't go through, like on Timmy D's, they could kind of track where he was last because of his debit card receipts. They can kind of go through there. And they seen that Timmy D's actually stopped at a gas station at a certain time of day, and then so they can kind of track where his location was based by that. But this kid had none of that. So how do you find a kid like that? Nobody knows when he was last seen. Nobody knows what he was wearing. Nobody knows, in what location he was. I mean, he told his parents he was going to go camping. And then there was this robbery deal. Somebody in that town. I mean, it's a town of 4,000 people. I grew up in a little rural town. And 4,000 people is the type of town where everybody knows everybody. Everybody's nose is in everybody's business. It's irritating as crap because somebody pulls in your driveway and just to turn around and you get 3 neighbors call you, say, hey, I just seen it. Here's calling. And I'm like, oh, I've been there. So in that kind of situation. So to me, the fact that we don't know what he was doing, we don't know where he was, we don't know what he was wearing, we don't know who he was with, all of that seems highly suspicious in a little bitty community like this.
Yeah, and the girlfriend, my question is, what does she know?
Exactly.
What does because she could have done all of that out of fear.
True. That's the thing. Is she doing it because she hates the guy, because she thinks he cheated on her? Is she doing it because she knows he was killed and she's trying to separate herself because she's afraid of something? There's all kinds of options there. And then of course, how old is this person? Is this person, if she's, a little bit younger, if she's 15, 16 years old, she just may be immature and that's how she handles things, but usually when somebody goes missing, and nobody goes missing in a good situation. So every time somebody's missing, it's always a difficult, scary situation, and so there's very rarely good, happy, pleasant outcomes of going missing. I know that's drastic to say, but even if the person's found, they've gone through an ordeal while they were missing, so it's never a, how bad does this woman hate this guy, to say, I'm going to delete. And why'd she delete her own Facebook page? It's just
yeah. And that's what I'm wondering. Like I feel she knows something and fear made her just shut that down.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I don't know him. I'm done. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, and maybe this is somebody that's from that area and they have seen so many people go missing and so many people die and so many people, just so many unknowns. She's afraid,
Yeah. And with him, he had already been in places where 2 deaths occurred,
Right.
So I can see fear doing that as well.
Right. And she could just be for her own safety. She's trying to hide,
Yeah.
and, and in that situation, you don't blame her. I mean, after all, and then if you, when you start to follow all these cases, I know publicly, this is our 3rd case out of Madison County. But like I said, we've got 14 cases so far, really disturbing cases out of this county. Now, JP is one missing person on the list. We're going to do another video about another person missing on the list. So since this one, Tammy, do you have anything else to add on JP?
Was there very much information that came out on the robbery? Is there a police report on that? I mean, it's strange that there's hardly any information about this case.
Right.
You try to search it out and you can't hardly find anything.
Yeah,
right.
And I put that on the police because they don't do their jobs. They're not investigating these cases.
Well, and like I said, we've had this in publication, in print. I believe it was in a newspaper, an actual mainstream media type publication that said that the people of that community feel like the police department just write off anything that has to do with drugs, like they're not going to investigate it if they're not worthy of their time or something. And to me, that's so disturbing. Now, since we're so short and I try to make these True Crime Tuesdays an hour, we're going to go ahead and blend over into another missing persons case out of the same area. But this one is decades old. This one is Gina Dawn Brooks. She's been missing since August 5th, 1989. And she was a 13-year-old girl that looks like she was snatched off the highway off of her bike, basically is what it looks like. Now, this story has had serial killer cases tied to it. It's had human trafficking tied to it. It's also had stories and leads that lead all the way to Canada, and the Mounties got involved. And so we're going to be talking about that case too. This is just our second second missing persons case on the list for Madison County. So now I'm going to switch gears a bit. Tammy, I know you've done more research on this case, but Gina Dawn Brooks, from the story that I have, basically she had come home from a ball game watching her brother play ball. And then about 10 o'clock or so was when that got over. She told her mom good night at her home. Then she decided she was going to go and see her boyfriend. So she got on her bicycle and she was going to ride the few blocks away to her boyfriend's house named TJ, but she never made it there. Tammy, what do you find this case, when it comes down to this case, we're again talking about Fredericktown. We're talking about a place. And at that time, I believe I read somewhere that it was actually only about 3,000 people there at that time. So it was an even smaller community at that time. What do you find so disturbing about this case? Give me some information on that.
Well, witnesses, they said that some people in a station wagon stopped and talked to her, and then the station wagon went on, and then a few moments later, they heard her screaming for help. And evidently that's when they took her, and then her bike was found, of course, I think later on that day, that next day.
Right.
And they just, like you said, they try to pin different people to it, and then they tried to pin that serial killer. There was a supposed serial killer, but then they dropped the charges on him. And
now you've got a new guy coming up that says he was one of 15 kids that was part of a human trafficking ring that was sexually assaulted. And so you've got all these different things. And the scary thing is we still haven't found her. So we don't know what happened to her. We can't tell you if she was shot, if she was stabbed, if she was, if she was suffocated. We can't tell you how she was killed, because we don't know where she is. And I find that disturbing. We never have found her. But then, you tie this back to the serial killer. We'll start with that. The serial killer story goes that in that rundown vehicle, the station wagon, in the back was a man named Nathan Williams. He goes by Danny. So Danny Williams. Now, Danny Williams was a convicted sex offender. He has some convictions for murdering and raping other girls and women, all the way back to the age of 14. It seems like he started sexually assaulting women at the age of 14. Now, he was supposedly in the back of that car. There was also supposed to be Bryant Squires and Timothy Blue. Now, the deal with all of this is they said that witnesses said it looked like Danny Williams in the back of the car. Okay. The problem with that is we need to go back to August 5th, 1989. She had stayed at the ball game till 10 o'clock. Then it was almost 10:30 before she left the house. So you're talking in Missouri, in August, it does stay daylight really late, but it is also kind of dusk. So by 10:30, it is what we'd call dusk. And so it's hard to see. And so I have a hard time thinking that yes, Danny Williams fits the scenario of all these things of that would be the type of person that would take Gina Brooks. But basically, their main reason why they believe it's him is because an eyewitness thinks they can ID him in the back of the station wagon. And that's basically the reason why they haven't been able to follow through. Now, I looked it up, and Danny Williams is the number one suspect in 3 sexual assaults and murders. He's convicted of 1. The other one got dropped. The other one, and then the other one's Gina Dawn Brooks. Well, he was actually, they thought they had their guy. In 1998, So 9 years after Gina's disappearance, they actually charged Danny Williams with first-degree murder. It's supposed to go on trial January of 2002. It never goes on trial. It's continually postponed, and then all of a sudden, last year, I think it was in May. Not sure. I didn't write down the month. Last year, the Madison County prosecutor, Dwight Robbins, dropped the first-degree murder charge. Now, as of right now, Danny Williams is in prison. He is set for parole, I think, in 2040 or something like that. I'll have to look that up. I'm not 100% sure. But what disturbs me the most is they say you've got Bryant Squires, which was supposed to be on in the car. He's dead, so we can't do anything about that. Then you've got Timothy Blue was implicated in the disappearance. And what he does is he says, oh, yeah, we did that. And I know exactly where it is. And he goes and takes the FBI on a wild goose chase, never does find the body. And then he finally admits, yes, I lied to the FBI. Now, he doesn't just say, hey, I know where she is and take them to a random location. He builds this whole big story of they buried her in a meat locker with rotten deer meat, and it's buried in the back end of a property that was owned by his family. And he goes and he lays it all out. Well, see, people don't understand the psychology of criminals. And when you start to study some of these people, sometimes the more detailed the story it is, the more you start to doubt it. Okay. Not that that the details aren't important, but sometimes the exaggeration of the details, it's not just deer meat in there. It has to be rotten deer meat, all these things. And they have all these details, and there was a car sitting here and this, when they get to adding all those details, you really have to watch their body language. You really, are they, you can watch eye movements and you can study some of this. You can watch eye movements of people, and when how the brain works, when you're looking up, and I believe you look up to the right, it's your memory. You're trying to your brain is trying to access the files of memory. When you look up and to the left, a lot of times you're fabricating things, and it depends on, some people have it opposite. So you have to really kind of gauge that person and know when they're saying something true and see where their eyes go. And so this is something that the FBI uses to try to tell if people are telling the truth. And it's not 100% accurate, but it is 90%, it's well up there. But the problem with it is when you get some people like this, you have people that are called, layman's terms, confessors. They confess to these things. Why would they do this? Well, for one, if you're already in prison for life and you are tired of your settings, if you can convince a law enforcement officer that you have information that they need, you're going to get taken out of your normal environment. You're going to get to go to a different environment. You're going to get to maybe eat things you're not used to eating. You're going to, it's like a mini vacation. They're going to go, and then a lot of them, they have a psychotic episode where they're just like, it's a game, and they want to see how far they can run the FBI into the ground so they can laugh about it to their friends, and so you have to understand, when you are dealing with some of these criminals, they're going to confess to things that's not true. They're going to make up so many details that you're like, this has got to be true. And then you find out none of it's true. And so you've got to really be careful. So when you're talking about Timothy Blue, he finally confesses, yes, I just put you on a wild goose chase. Okay, so then that takes you all the way back to the beginning. Was Timothy Blue even there? Does he even know anything? Was he in that car? And so that takes you back to the beginning to see, it makes you question every little bit of evidence you think you have. And in reality, Danny Williams assaulted and killed different women, and assaulted so many, I lost count of how many he assaulted. Is he the type of guy that could have killed Gina Brooks? Yes, he is. Do they have enough to tie him to the case? No, because this is something else you need to understand. He was charged back in 1998 with first-degree murder. Those charges were dropped in 2023. Why? Well, this guy has carried these charges for years. So something has had to come up that seriously makes these law officers question if they have enough to take him to court. I've sat on some homicide cases. I was a juror in a homicide case. And the hard part was when you went to, it wasn't just, is he guilty or is he isn't innocent? You have all these different counts that you have to say, is he guilty of this one count? Don't think about any of the other counts. On this one count, is he guilty beyond a reasonable doubt? Yes or no? Okay. Now, this count, so if this guy's got 10 counts, you can't take all 10 together and say he's a guilty SOB. No, you have to take each count. Is he guilty of this? Is he guilty of this? And then each one of those counts have different sentences. And depending on how the trial set up, we had to, on each one of those counts, we had to say, is he guilty beyond a reasonable doubt? Yes or no? And if there's any doubt, any doubt whatsoever, you have to say, no, he's not guilty of beyond a reasonable doubt. And so they don't have enough that they think they can take him to court and get the jurors to say beyond a reasonable doubt. And, but then for them to go ahead and take it a step further and just drop the charges, that's something different. So it's not that they don't have enough to take him to court. They are starting to question what they have, or they wouldn't drop the charges completely. So I have talked way too long. Girls, say something.
Do you think there's another suspect then?
I'm sorry?
Do you think there's another suspect? You think that's the reason they might have dropped the charges?
I think so. I think they either have another suspect or they have a piece of evidence that doesn't fit to the suspect they have. Because, see, you can't change the evidence to fit what you have. You get this narrative in your head and you think it's all going to flow, but then you get one piece of evidence that's drastically out of place, then that just busts your whole narrative. So to me, it seems more like... To me, it seems more like something has come up. Somebody has dug into that old cold file and they have found something that is startlingly out of place. And once they see that, they're like, okay. So this is when you're going through these cold cases, you'll see where police get a narrative pretty quickly on in things. And then evidence will start piling up, either pro their narrative or con, against their narrative. And to me, it seems like somebody has gone back in and seen something that made them seriously question, or they just let him hold the charges for another 10 years. He's had those charges on him since 1998. What happened?
And also in her case, they went on the word pretty much of someone confessing on their deathbed,
right?
Who was a criminal,
Right.
And another
do you remember who that was? Do you have the name of that? I forgot to write it down.
One of the ones that you mentioned.
Was that Squires? Because he's the one that's dead. He confessed. And didn't I see something about Squires had he was the confessor that had confessed other things that he had nothing to do with.
Yes. And also back then, I graduated in 86. Station wagons were so common.
Oh yeah.
And again, at the
and it wasn't anything that was out of the ordinary. Like this was a brand new flaming red, it was just a common beat down. They're not even sure what color it was. See, this is what makes me think they don't know Danny Williams was the one in the back of the car, because they can't tell you if it was a green or a blue or a white. Or did they say green, blue, or gray? They're like, I don't know. It was either a green or a blue or a gray or, I'm like, you can't even tell us the color of the car, but you're going to identify the man sitting in the back seat?
Yeah. And that also goes with that, the time of night it was, It's not daylight out. If you can't even make out the color of the car, how can you make out who was in the car?
See, to me, if I was a defense attorney at the trial for Danny Williams, not that I think he's innocent by no means. I'm just saying they're going to find every loophole they can in your theory. And the very first one is, how the heck do you know? Technically, the only thing that you've got all kinds of little conspiracy things around. And yes, the guy fits your suspect profile, but the only actual evidence you have is some witness who says, yeah, that's the guy I seen in the back of the car at 10:30 at night, when I can't even tell you what color the car is, but that's the guy. To me, I could tell you what color the car is. I couldn't tell you if that's the guy, and I think that would be the common thing. You would notice the color of the car, but you may not notice the man's features inside the backseat of the car. So that to me, I'm not saying Danny Williams is innocent. I'm just saying I think it's odd that after all these years, suddenly they've decided to drop the murder charges because either something new's come up, they have found something in the case file that's been there since the beginning that they didn't see. But something I would say we need to keep an eye on this, because to me it seems like it's an odd time. He was charged in 98. The case, they're dropped in 2023. So I'm like, why? Just let him ride. He's, at this point, it seems like he's not going to be getting out of prison anytime soon. But still, it's like, why do you drop them? If he's already carried these charges for years, let him carry them some more. It makes me wonder if they've got something else, someone else has come forward. Now, we have to jump into the human trafficking story. There is a person online that's making all kinds of videos about Gina Dawn Brooks. And I don't find him credible. And I'm not saying that he's not, or that he's lying or anything like that, but I don't find him credible. I've studied, like I said, I've studied all kinds of behavioral psychology. I've studied neurolinguistic programming. I've studied, all these different techniques that law enforcement uses to see if you're lying, body language, all these kinds of things. And to me, he doesn't seem legitimate in the way in his body language, but he also never explains why he's there. His story is he was one of 15 kids with his uncle and his aunt and some cousins, and they all were in this caravan. Okay, see, this is another thing. There was a caravan of 3 cars following each other, and he says that they saw her, they stopped and snatched her and took her onto this campground with these other kids, and there was police involved. There was a corrupt doctor involved, and they were literally at this campground, 15 kids, 10 adults, and they were systematically raped and molested and abused and beaten and killed and all these things. And at one point in time, he got his arm broke, so they took him to a doctor who was also in on it. And then got his hands fixed, but I'm sitting here going, you never explain how you're there. You never explain.
Why is he still alive? Why isn't he,
why is he alive? Why is he alive? And nobody else is. Why is he never explains why he's in the situation. It's something that his uncle and his aunt are doing. That's not his parents. So did he live with his aunt and uncle? Did he just, his parents agree to let him go on a camping trip with his uncle? And why are they taking a whole group of 15 kids, and all of his cousins and all this stuff? So I'm saying, and then you had 2 people that he said, at one point he said they were police officers, and at another point he said they were dressed up like police officers. And then he has all, and if you notice, he's got all of these details. See, this is where I wanted to bring in the details. One story, he's sitting in the so-called campground where this happened, and he's like, over here is a red vehicle, and then there's this car sitting here, and there's a tent there, and that's where they raped her. And then I happened to have a Boy Scout pocket knife that they didn't know I had, so I ran into the tent and stabbed my uncle in the neck, but I just barely missed the jugular. So if I hadn't missed the jugular, we wouldn't be talking about Gina today. She would be okay. And that's when they dragged me out and broke my arm and smashed me with their gun. And, so I'm sitting here going, there's so many details. Anybody that's been through trauma, you're going to get some very specific details, and then you're going to have brain fog around all kinds of other things. Okay. You're going to laser in on certain details, and then other details you're not going to be able to remember for nothing because of the trauma that you're facing. Now, he never explains why. So one discrepancy in the story is, are they actually cops, or are they dressed up as cops? Why are you there? Why did you survive and nobody else? Why did, how did, in one point he says, and that girl from Springfield. So not only do they have local kids that they have snatched off of the road, but they've got somebody from, however many miles away it is from Springfield to Frederickstown. If you guys want to Google that, however many miles away from Springfield to Frederickstown, halfway across the state. Oh yeah. And by the way, she's there too. They kidnapped her. See, and then one other major thing is he says that she was grabbed at the ball game. She wasn't snitched. So I'm sitting here going, you got one story where you have a convoy of 3 vehicles and snatching her off of her bicycle. And then you have another one that says she was snatched at the ball game, which we know she was snatched on that road there by the church. Okay. She wasn't snatched at the ball game. So you've got all these discrepancies, but he's got so many details, it clouds those discrepancies. You also need to understand there are people that they seek attention by inserting themselves into investigations where they don't belong. You've got people who are victims of something else. And I've had this happen in my own career. They are victimized. They are victims' family members, and they're so desperate to get their case solved that they start seeing connections to everything that they see around them. And that's one of those confirmation biases. You start studying how the brain works. That's actually a common occurrence. But when you are in such trauma and such pain, I had this person that I cared about deeply deceive me, and I realized she was deceiving herself because she saw connections in famous cases. So she thought her case was tied to this famous case. It wasn't tied to that famous case, but in her desperation, somebody needs to pay attention to me. They'll pay attention to that case. And it's kind of all operates at a subconscious level. It's not like she was trying to lie to me or lie to herself or all the thousands of people she's told this story to. It was a matter of she's so traumatized and desperate that she's going to see things that aren't there. She's going to tie her trauma into something else, just desperate to get some help. And so you need to understand this person may have been traumatized by his uncle, by his aunt, by some people. But it's just odd that he all of a sudden, okay, this is a famous case. Let me insert Gina into this group of kids. There's a famous case in Springfield. Let me insert her into this narrative. And so when you're watching these things on YouTube, I want you guys to understand that it's not necessarily that the person is lying outright, trying to be manipulative and lying. It's something that they have grown to believe in their own self because of their own trauma, and they're so desperate for help. And so I don't say this man's flat out lying about these things. I'm saying his stories are a little bit suspicious and they don't add up. Now, if he's been traumatized and he has a case involved that he's traumatized as a child, then I highly suggest He gets help for that case. He gets, he gets therapy for his childhood trauma. But to constantly be adding in these other famous cases to this group of 15 kids, it just really makes it suspicious to me. Did you guys find him credible, or is this just me and my over analyzing things?
No, I didn't find him credible. And I've also, in fact, you and I have worked on one case in particular, where a man, he totally believed that he was this child who was taken, well, kidnapped as a child, totally believed that, and was adamant about DNA. And then we found out DNA already was done.
And it wasn't him.
And it wasn't him. And I've had another case like that where somebody thought they were this child, a person that was kidnapped as a child, named other kids that were mentioned or kidnapped as children. And the person who put all this out should be locked up because she took it to YouTube without fact checking.
Mm-hmm.
And one of these young men totally was questioning his identity, and he did the S word, and nothing was done to her. But mentally, yes, that happens more than we think.
Now, when I was studying psychology, and see, I'm actually certified to be a life coach for victims' family members, and I did that for a couple of years before I came back to doing true crime. And I come back and I see all this stuff online and on YouTube, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, I wish I hadn't stepped away so long. But there's something. I study all these scientific studies. Okay. I learned how the brain operates because I didn't understand how this person could hurt me so deeply. And I believe, I think there were some mental health issues and maybe a bit of schizophrenia. I'm not so sure, but who knows? But the thing is there is something I was studying, and it's called the illusory truth effect. Okay. It's more commonly known as the illusion of truth. Now, there was a scientific study done at, I can't remember what university it was, but basically what it is they did a study to show if you could brainwash someone into believing a lie that they already know is a lie. Okay. And so they did this, and they took a control group of people that they already knew certain things were not true. And they like, yes, I know that's not true. That's ridiculous. Okay. They did and systematically showed them this information over and over and over again. So they showed them this known lie over and over and over and over again. Okay. And within the course of a couple months, 90% of those people that had seen this information flash before them again and again and again and again and again. Okay. 90% of those people, about 90% of those people, were at the point already that they were questioning, well, maybe that is true. Okay. And all they didn't show any facts or they didn't make up any science or anything to try to prove their theory. They just retold the lie again and again and again and again. Over the course of months, it would just pop up again, lie, 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 lie. Okay. Over the course of these couple months, after hearing it over and over and over again, they literally had programmed their brain into thinking, maybe this is true. And so in that short amount of time, they literally showed, you tell a lie long enough, or you read a lie long enough, you see a lie long enough, you're going to start believing it. It may take a long period of time, but this is what you need to understand. If someone's been traumatized, it boosts that effect because you get so much trauma, so much emotion, so many, neurochemicals changing in your body with the stress. It's going to speed that process up a little bit. Okay. And so I'm not saying that this man is flat out trying to cause problems or he's got any, any kind of, malicious intent. I'm just saying be very cautious when you watch these things on YouTube, because there's all sorts of questions. And then when you question this person with these questions, he just says, well, you can believe what you want. He doesn't follow through with, well, here's my evidence. You think I'm false. Okay, here's my evidence. You read it and tell me what you think. And so this is where you really, he's got that cognitive bias already that this is what's happened. And I hope he gets help.
Yeah,
But I
and
really
if
hope
it was
so.
a caravan or big vehicle like that would be noticed more than a station
Three.
wagon.
3 vehicles. Nobody
Yeah,
noticed 3 vehicles following
exactly.
along that station wagon in town.
And
And so,
incidentally, it's 222 miles from Springfield, Missouri to Fredericktown, Missouri. So
thank you.
And
So that caravan went, what'd you say, 300 or 200?
222.
Oh, perfect. Okay, so this caravan went and picked up a kid 222 miles away, and then decided to drive to Fredericktown and pick up another kid along with the 13 other kids that they have. So that makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
yeah, and
So,
with
but see,
kidnappings, with
Yeah.
kidnappings like this, and I'm just going by past cases, it seems to me that there most likely were 2 people. One got out,
Mhm.
snatched her quick. We seen that in Elizabeth Smart, where because they can get them so quick,
Yeah.
and be gone.
Yeah. Well, and I'm not saying that it's not those 3 guys. No, I'm not saying it ain't Danny and Bryant and Timothy. I'm not saying it's not those guys. I just find it
Right.
very suspect that they dropped the murder that, along with the fact that the one guy said confessed to a bunch of stuff he didn't have anything to do with on his deathbed, and this was one of them. And then the Timothy Blue, he lied about the location and then admitted that he was just sending them on a goose chase.
Yeah, I think they even drained a quarry or something.
Yeah. They drained a quarry for it. And now this one thing I have to say, the police force in 1989 really knocked it out of the box trying to find somebody, because there was they called in the county mounties. I mean,
they had different police forces coming in to help.
Yeah, and so it's not from the lack of police concern for in the Gina Dawn Brooks case.
They even had the Canadian Mounties ready.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. That there was some tip that tied it to somewhere in Canada, and they called the county Mounties, and one Mountie says, "Okay, it's going to take me a day to get there and a day back, so I'll give you an answer in 2 days." And he went out and it wasn't, and came back and says, "Nope." So I mean, they called in the county Mounties on this. I mean, they called in everybody. But the thing is when it's something like this, it's a 13-year-old girl missing from her hometown, 10:30 at night on her bicycle. I was always had to be in the house by dusk. I wasn't allowed to be out that late at night. And so it's just one of those things where you're like, it would, if she could have just stayed home that night. Don't go to your boyfriend's, just stay home, but you always go through those things and you think, man, if I had just done this, or if I had just done that, everything would have turned out different. My next thing that I thought I had written down here in my notes that I forgot, I kind of passed over. Her boyfriend TJ is where she was going to his house. TJ and a friend was sitting on his front porch and actually heard her scream, TJ, supposedly, when she was snatched. So I'm saying she got almost to her boyfriend's house. So, but my thought on it is I'd hate to be TJ, because he's like, I was so close, and he's had to live with this since 1989, so that's, it's tragic, and it's terrible. I also feel sorry for the guy that's bringing up the human trafficking stories. You think, well, why would you feel sorry for him? Because he honestly believes this. He honestly, he has suffered some kind of trauma, and this is the trauma coming out. He's a grown man now, and this is the trauma coming out. And but on other things, I kind of dig into conspiracies, and I'm thinking, okay, well, if you want to be a good investigator, you need to put him on the suspect list. You also need to put TJ on the suspect list. If you want to be a good investigator, everybody's a suspect. That's the way it works until you start eliminating everybody, you know.
And I
But
wonder too, did her mother even know that she went out?
no, that was
Because
the
I
thing.
know at
Yeah.
13, I mean, I couldn't, if we at 13, no, we wouldn't be allowed to ride nowhere.
No,
at that
and see,
point.
that was the thing. She came home and her mom went to bed about 10:30, and she told her good night. And then
And
a
then
little
she
bit later, she
decided,
told her brother she was going to take her bike out and go see TJ. And so basically, the mom woke up about 1 o'clock in the morning because I wondered why did the police get called at 2 o'clock in the morning? You know, and I was like, this is just weird. And I looked it up, and basically that the mom woke up about 1 o'clock and her daughter wasn't in the house.
She might
And
have snuck out
she
even.
did. And her daughter wasn't in the house. And so she talked to her son, and her son's like, well, she was supposed to go ride her bike to TJ's and be right back. And then here it was 1 o'clock. And so the police weren't even called to say she was missing until after 2 a.m. And so that's where why didn't TJ call? Was it one of those things he was sitting on the porch and he thought he heard someone scream his name, but he's like, oh, I'm crazy, I didn't hear nothing, or was it so close? Was they the witnesses that saw the car? I have a hard time thinking that they were the witnesses that saw the car and the man in the back of the car and all that, because if they had, then they could have called 911 sooner. So I don't know. Nothing makes sense with all of that.
yeah, and I would think they'd be probably running after, you know what I mean? Trying to.
Yeah. They would be doing something.
Yeah.
And so I think they must have just heard something, and he thinks he heard her say his name. But it was only it was 5 blocks from the house. So, I mean, if you scream loud enough, anybody can hear you in 5 blocks. So it's just, it's one of those unfortunate things where now he's had to live all these years with it. Okay, well, do you guys have any more comments? I think we've blithered on for an hour.
I think it'll be interesting to see how Fredericktown handles this case, modern day Fredericktown.
Yeah.
We'll see if they step up and do what they need to do, if they get any leads.
Yeah. And and there's part of me that listens to the human trafficking stories like, oh yes, it's a big huge conspiracy. But in this situation and in these cases that we've found so far, there's not necessarily a big conspiracy. It's just people not doing their jobs, people not caring because it's a drug addict, or they're this is it does not necessarily conspiracy. It's more of a the drug addicts will take care of themselves and they just don't do their jobs, or they have other priorities and they put them on the last of the list, and so it's not even necessarily a conspiracy. It's just corruption and almost lack of concern, it seems like. But anyways, all right, you have any last 2 cents, Cricket?
No, I just hope that they start doing their jobs and getting these cases solved.
Yeah. Well, and the naive side of me wants to think, well, hopefully they just need some more training. Hopefully they just need more funding.
They need
hopefully
an overhaul.
But I think it's like a lot of things. There's a lot of things that we all, in just about every area in America, there's a lot of things with the political and the law enforcement scene that just needs a complete overhaul. And I'm afraid that's the way it is in this county.
Yeah.
So, okay, well, we're going to jump off here. Thank you guys for watching another episode of True Crime Tuesdays.